Michael Dowd, Sermons on Death. Excerpts of Michael's sermons from 2015 to 2023. This video is posted October 2024, honoring his death 1 year after he died on October 7th, 2023. Today is September 28th, 2024. I'm Connie Barlow. I'm the wife of Michael Dowd, now his widow, and I'm sitting at the table where I record all my own tree videos. I've done a lot of them over the years. It was my own work in science. But I'm sitting here in order to record the beginning and the end of what I've already put together. And these are excerpts of 3 of Michael's recorded sermons while we were living on the road for 18 years. He was America's evolutionary evangelist, and I was behind the scenes and sometimes speaking too on that. But during a lot of that time, he and I both talked about a deep time, an evolutionary ecological understanding of death, both our personal natural death, the death of species through time, and also the rise and fall of civilizations. And that was really his last worldview shift, was coming into that. But he had a long way to go along the way. He started off as an evolutionary evangelist with a sense of progress, a sense that things are just going to keep getting better and better and better as time goes on. And then in 2015, he read William Catton's book, Overshoot. And he recorded it on audio. And I listened to it while on audio, and I also read it. And we both say this is the most important book we ever read because it took us into an understanding of not just with climate change, but with everything else going on in our civilization, which William Catton called Overshoot. That book was published in 1980, and yet it still speaks today. I was a science writer, ecology and evolution, and yet I really didn't understand ecology from a systems view, both in nature and then applying it to the human presence in nature. So Michael got that shift in 2015, and he and I had been climate activists big time since our wake up December 2012. And you'll hear about that in the excerpts. You will hear about our wake up in 2012 to climate. But then again, 2015, encountering Catton changed everything. And from that time, he started to read, Tainter, Toynbee, John Michael Greer, William Ophuls. I read William Ophuls too. This is his 2018 book, but he had a lot of earlier books. Plato's Revenge, Immoderate Greatness, that was an important one. And this was really written for a popular audience to understand historically what has happened to all the civilizations on this planet that have ever been here, and they've all gone under. Now, we have a lot of indigenous cultures that have been around for thousands of years, certainly evolving during that time, but not wiping out their ecology, not running overshoot the way the actual civilizations did. So you're going to hear in his 2015 sermon, this is 6 months after he encountered and read Overshoot. And I just went and looked through the videos of the sermons in 2015, and I found one that not only had a lot of material on death in it, but whose title was on death. This was part of a 3-part guest sermon series he was giving during the summer at a Unitarian Universalist congregation in Ludington, Michigan. And by the way, I'm in Ypsilanti, Michigan. This is southern Michigan. I actually grew up in Detroit. And very lucky that when COVID hit, Michael and I had to end our itinerancy September 2020. And we came to southern Michigan, not so much because I still had family here, But he had family here too, even though he had grown up first in New York and then Florida. He had family here too, especially his youngest daughter, who had just had her first child. And so we came back to help out with that. We rented a one-bedroom apartment in Ypsilanti, Michigan, southeast Michigan. And I still am. Here I am. It seemed like a castle then, because again, we had been living out of our van, in and out, moving from one home hospitality to another. I think we stayed in a hotel, 18 years motel, 2 or 3 times max. That was it. So we lived on the road, and now I can live here wonderfully. I don't need the van anymore. I don't drive. I walk to the food co-op. I'm very fortunate that I became a widow when I was already in a place where I could do well on my own. And I like to always look at the bright side of things. My mother was widowed twice before she became my age. I was 71 when I was widowed. I'm 72 now. So back to the topic of death. These are excerpts of 3 sermons that he gave. July 2015 was a Unitarian Universalist congregation in Ludington, Michigan. November 2018 was a big annual lecture at St. Paul's United Methodist Church in Houston, Texas, and this was professionally filmed. The final sermon I'm excerpting was recorded August 2023. Again, this was also the final live sermon he did on stage before he died 7 weeks later, suddenly. I'll mention something about that later. Now, the August one was at the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Flint, Michigan. Because of the Zoom setups that churches had to install during the COVID years, I didn't have to film it. And the important thing to say about this is that the worldview shift you're going to hear him going through is the final one he went through. And that is the shift through doom, through all the stages of grief. We've been going around and around in circles with that. But once he found the gift, started experiencing the benefits of not just having the clarity of being aware of inevitable downward trends in civilization, as of course in climate, and the ongoing biodiversity crisis, not just being aware, and not just being accepting of it, but finding the gift, experiencing the benefits. And I've just followed along the way. I've been moving trees since, starting Torreya Guardians in 2004 and advocating, and then expanding when climate change started getting really fast, expanding my advocacy to all slow-moving native trees in North America. But I've been taken along the way by him. I benefit from he's an autodidact. He just reads everything in communication with others, did a lot of conversations, POSTDOOM conversations, which is the main thing you're going to find on the POSTDOOM.com website, which now has new leadership, very effective, wonderful leadership. I've got no complaints 1 year after. I'm still feeling the benefits of a POSTDOOM understanding. Again, grateful that I was widowed after my mom was widowed twice. So that's the standard I look at. And I find benefits all the time, so much to be grateful for, including the memory of my husband. So let's get started. You're going to hear these 3 sermons, starting off 2015, then moving to 2018, and finally 2023. And many of us, especially when you watch the whole sermon, I'm just excerpting here, many of us were astounded by how we felt about his way of being, not just what he was saying, his way of being in what proved to be his final sermon. Let's get started. July 2015, People's Church of Ludington, Michigan. And It's a Unitarian Universalist congregation.
I'd like to speak this morning about how holding our mortality and holding the reality of death from a sacred science perspective can actually enhance the quality of our lives, the quality of our relationships, and certainly the quality of our legacy, what we pass on when we go on, when we die. We now know that death is natural and necessary at every scale of reality, from the death of stars to the death of mountains to the death of everything. We know this. And so knowing this doesn't take away the grief of death, the sadness of death. But what it does is it gives it a cosmic container. It helps us see that it's not like humans are responsible for the existence of death in the universe. You know, our great-great-great-great-grandmother ate an apple, and then that disobedience caused God to say, now death, you must die, and now death exists in the universe. We now know that that was a mythic story that attempted to understand or explain death in the same way that we had just so stories around the world that explain how the zebra got its stripes. But it was no more scientifically accurate than that. But what it did is it created a death-phobic culture in the West, where we don't see death as natural, we don't see it as inevitable, we don't see it as healthy, we don't see it as necessary. And so we often fight it to the very end. That's at the personal level. Most of us grew up with a sense of the inevitability of progress. What does it mean to have the death of sort of the religion of progress? The idea that, of course, we live better than our parents, and they live better than their parents. And of course, our kids are going to have an easier life, more comfort, more longer life, technology. And yet so many of us are dealing with the sadness, with the grief, with the fear that maybe that's not the case. Maybe, in fact, things are going to be more difficult 50 years from now, rather than easier. Even 20 years from now. Well, there's a grieving that's often necessary, and if we hold it off or just pretend that, like, no, things are good, you know, they'll figure something out. Climate change, you know, peak oil, the pollution of the oceans, the amount that there's more plastic in the oceans now than some of the life-giving organisms that we need. I mean, we can just say, we can think that technology will, you know, they'll figure it out, or somehow technology will come to our rescue and save our butts. But most of us know in our gut that that's probably not likely. And yet, how do we stay inspired in the face of some really, really scary stuff? Related to the health of the water, the health of the oceans, the health of the fisheries that are collapsing all over the world. The fact that we've been losing topsoil at such a magnitude that we have at most 65 to 75 more years of topsoil, and then the earth is basically going to be without topsoil. It's eroding that fast. 5 years ago, as many of you know, I was diagnosed with cancer, had a tumor the size of my fist in my spleen, went through 6 rounds of chemotherapy. And there was a time when we were looking at the possibility that I could die in the next 6 months. And even when that was the case, I had what religious people call the peace that passes understanding. And it wasn't because I was holding out hope for pearly gates and mansions when I died. I'm a religious naturalist. I have no supernatural otherworldly beliefs. I interpret all the mythic language of religion in a this world realistic way. So it seems to me as a religious naturalist pretty clear that where we go to when we die is the same place we came from before we were born. And whether you speak of that as coming from nothing and returning to nothing, or coming from mystery and returning to mystery, or coming from God and returning to God, I think all those are legitimate ways of talking about it. But as I sometimes say, not just humorously, if where I go to when I die isn't the very same place that all other plants and animals and bacteria have gone, I'm going to be pissed. Even when I thought that I could die soon, I came to the place where I recognized that what could I be grateful for? I started looking at the past and realizing that, you know, I was 51 at the time. Most of my ancestors probably didn't live to 51. My kids were doing well, my ideas were doing well, so I got to this place where I trusted it, that even if I died in the next 6 months, And there was a period before the chemo took effect, we thought that that might happen. Even when that was the case, I felt like I could trust that whatever happens on the other side of death is just fine. See, that to my mind is what faith, real faith is. Faith is trusting that whatever happens on the other side of death is just fine. Because fear of a hellish after-death scenario, or attachment or hope to a glorious after-death scenario, are just that, fear or attachment, not trust, not faith. And so knowing that at every scale of the universe, wherever we look, whatever has been revealed scientifically, we see that death is natural, it's necessary, and thus it's no less sacred than life. Death, mortality is sacred. The other thing that often we don't factor in is the costs. I'm a baby boomer, okay? The idea that baby boomers kind of assume that we sort of have the right to be kept alive at whatever the cost because we have the technology to do it. Future generations, 100 years from now, will call that evil. The idea that we thought that we could just be kept alive technologically for as long as whatever, not even factoring in how that's impacting the next generations in terms of what we spend our money on. Connie and I have created, and this may be a little controversial here, but I want to share it anyway. Connie and I have created a living will that we've given to both sides of the family that we've said basically we don't see death as a problem, we don't see it as the enemy, we say it is just as sacred as life, and if or when we get to the place where we can't in any meaningful way contribute to society or to our family, like taking care of grandkids or whatever, or where we become a burden to others or to society, we're going to call our family and friends together, we're going to say our goodbyes, and we're going to take ourselves out to the glory of God. That is honoring reality. We don't see taking one's own life with the negative stigma that that has for so many in this culture. Now that's just our choice. My point simply is this. On the personal level, by embracing that I will not live forever, that soon, Connie and I visit graveyards all the time, and we look at gravestones. And I'll do it because it reminds me, it wasn't long ago before a lot of women died in childbirth and children died under the age of 5. But also, I do it because it reminds me that I soon will be as everlastingly dead as any of these people. And I'll stand at the gravestone and I'll read the dates, and I'll think to myself, whatever this person may have believed about his soul or her soul or spirit or consciousness, whatever it is that transcends death, that's cool, that's great. I'm just a bow of respect to that. However that person thought about reality that helped them live a better life, that's great. But from the perspective of every life form in the universe, this person is everlastingly dead. And soon I'm going to be just as everlastingly dead. And by simply reminding myself of that, it allows me to not put off the things that are important to my life. I live with legacy consciousness. I live with, okay, this month, what can I do? Here we are, Connie and I are staying in one of Dave and Chrissy's homes there, the Red Barn up on their land. And it's like, what can we do this summer that will enhance our legacy? That will, like if I die at the end of the summer, what will pass on? Now, to my knowledge, I'm cancer-free. But I still live with that, reminding myself every season that this could be my last.
November 2018. St. Paul's United Methodist Church in Houston, Texas. This is an excerpt from a whole series produced by a group called Living the Questions.
One of the most important, if not the most important things that we can do to have equanimity, to have peace in the midst of chaos, to be in action and not be just totally overwhelmed by depressing, challenging, difficult times, is to really have our best understanding of reality, the reality of impermanence, the reality of mortality, the reality of death, and hold it in a sacred, meaningful, personal, and inspiring way. For a number of years, Connie and I used charts. And this is one of the charts that we used whenever we did programs on a sacred science approach to death. We would take a look at the major sciences that have anything to do with death. Paleontology, evolutionary biology, embryology, cell biology, ecology, astronomy and astrophysics, geology and geography and math. And then we took a look at some of the major scientific discoveries in each of these areas that have helped us come to an understanding that there's not only nothing wrong with death, there is something profoundly right with death, that you can't have a universe without death. So here is a litany that religious congregations have used. I'm going to invite you to just respond with the refrain. When I do like this, you will all just ask, is this a universe we can say yes to? Stars are born and stars die. Along the way, these stars fashion the very atoms of our bodies. Mountains are born and mountains die. Along the way, these mountains create the particles of sand and clay that blend with dead plants to become soil. Glaciers come and glaciers go. Along the way, they grind rocks into new soil and sculpt ponds and lakes. Species come and species go. Along this odyssey of evolution, marvels emerge: eyes, limbs, feathers, song, terror, love. Cells are born and cells die. Along the way, the winnowing yields fingers and toes, fins and wings, and the miracle of healing from injury. Forests of cells are born and die, but not let go. Along the way, these ancestors' cells stiffen into wood of uncommon strength and endurance, allowing the living green cells to reach for the sky. Baby animals are born in abundance, and myriad plant seeds are cast to the wind. Along the way, most of these children become food, supporting the vast ecological web of life. Humans are born and humans die. Along the way, each may blossom with love and accrue wisdom as elders, and then by their passing make room for generations of children now and forevermore. Ideas are born and ideas die. Along the way, they nourish the human journey onward, inward, and outward in an arc of wonder that now embraces 100 billion galaxies. Love comes and love fades, dies, or endures. Along the way, we experience the richness of existence, sanctified by laughter and tears. Each of us is born and each of us will die. Along the way, our awareness of death urges us to live fully, to give fully, and to take not one moment for granted. Death is natural and necessary at every level of reality. And the ancients could not have possibly known this in the ways that we do. That's why it's so vital that we continue to honor reality, whether we use God language or secular language, that we honor reality in terms of ongoing revelation and not get frozen in time. Death is no less sacred than life. And thus, Good Fridays are consistently followed by Easter Sundays. This is my cosmic rosary. All right. It's called great story beads. I mean, they're called different things by different people, but each bead signifies some significant event in the history of everyone and everything. This is the whole universe story. I consider each of these a grace moment. And one of the things that we understand from the history of the universe is that one of the main things that drives evolution and complexity and transformation is chaos, breakdowns, and bad news. Turns out that nothing is more important than chaos, breakdowns, and bad news for catalyzing creativity, catalyzing transformation. And so again, this is seeing that death isn't a problem, death is a necessity that when embraced can have life-changing import. The gifts of death. Mountains die, oceans die, continents die. Without the death of species, there would be no complex life. Without the death of fetal cells in the embryonic stage of development, we'd all be spheres. The reason we have shape is because cells died here, 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 and here. Without the death of plants and animals, there would be no food. I mean, this is obvious when we think about it, but we're just not used to thinking about death in a positive way. Without the death of stars, there would be no periodic table of elements, no planets, no life. Without the death of elders, there would be no room for children. I mean, think about it. In a finite world, if all you have is birth with no death, very quickly you're wall-to-wall people, wall-to-wall skunks, wall-to-wall bacteria, 60 feet deep. It doesn't take long. Death is essential on a finite planet. So without death, there would be no ancestors. Without death, time would not be precious. So what then are the gifts of death? The gifts of death are Mars and Mercury, Saturn and Earth. The gifts of death are the atoms of stardust within our bodies. The gifts of death are the splendors of shape and form and color. The gifts of death are diversity, the immense journey of life. The gifts of death are food, the sustenance of life. The gifts of death are seeing, hearing, feeling, deeply feeling. The gifts of death are the urgency to act, the desire to fully be and become. The gifts of death are joy and sorrow, laughter and tears. The gifts of death are lives that are fully and exuberantly lived, then graciously and gratefully given up for now and forevermore. Amen. What matters most, of course, is our legacy. Whatever has given your life meaning, whatever the thousands of things that have given your life meaning, the final meaning of your life is your legacy. And David Brooks talked about this in terms of the difference between an honorable death and a dishonorable death. David Brooks, back about 6-7 years ago, wrote a piece in the New York Times on death and budgets. He said, "We think the budget mess is a squabble between partisans in Washington, but in large measure it's about our inability to face death and our willingness as a nation to spend whatever it takes to push it just slightly over the horizon. See, there are supernormal medical technologies that our ancestors never had to say no to, but many of us will have to say no to, otherwise this is the way we're going to die, because this is the default position. This is what all the incentives are moving us in." And what I sometimes say is, imagine that this guy here is like 85 years old. He had a great life. He had an amazing legacy. And in his last 7 months of life, he was kept alive like this, at the cost of 48 college educations. What's his net legacy? It's real mixed. Supernormal medical technology creates the physical suffering, emotional distress, family discord, and humongous societal costs. Until we grasp that death plays a vital and necessary role in an evolving cosmos, Christianity will be shackled by unnatural, otherworldly notions of the gospel. Medical technologies will continue to prolong physical and emotional suffering and provoke family discord. The medical industry will continue to underwrite the widening gap between the rich and the poor. And seniors and their families will continue to be seduced into perhaps the greatest generational injustice and legacy diminishing evil in history. One of our dearest colleagues in the religious naturalism movement, the sacred realism movement, is Loyal Rue, and I love this quote. "Death is the entrance fee paid on exiting." Death is the entrance fee paid on exiting.
August 2023, Michael's final sermon. Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Flint, Michigan.
The second thing is to honor something that in our civilization, in American culture, we keep at arm's length. We don't want to think about. And yet, as every spiritual tradition throughout human history has reminded us, when we keep our own mortality as an advisor, when we remind ourselves that we're not everlasting, we're going to die, and that at some point, whether it's the next 10 years or the next 2 million years, our species will go extinct. So when we honor that mortality and our own mortality, we can live fearlessly. And we don't take life for granted. As many of you know, because I've shared it the last time I was here, or perhaps the time before that, 14 years ago, I had an aggressive form of cancer that could have killed me in 8 to 10 months. I had a tumor the size of my fist in my spleen. And I went through a few days of freak out. And then I just reminded myself, okay, can I be with the possibility of worst case scenario, which is that I'm going to die in the next 10 months? Because as some of you have heard me say before, my creed, my belief system, my faith statement in a nutshell is really quite simple. Reality is my God. Evidence is my scripture. The epic of evolution is my creation story. Ecology is my theology. Integrity is my spiritual path. And fostering right relationship to reality is my mission. So in that context, if reality is my God, I reminded myself as I realized I could die in the next 10 months that, okay, if that's real, I can accept that. Then that's my allegiance is to what's real, whether I like it or not. That's what I surrendered to. And once I did that, once I accepted that I could die in the next 10 months, if the chemo didn't work, I would have died in the next 10 months, I had no fear. I was able to live every single day with awareness like, oh my God, I'm still alive. What a gift. I'm eating a meal. Wow, what a blessing. You know, I'm going for a walk with my wife and we're looking at this was on Whidbey Island. We're looking at the Salish Sea. Oh my gosh. So I wish I could say I'd done this before, but I didn't. It was only basically accepting and honoring that I was mortal and that I could die soon. And even if I didn't die in the next 10 months, I was probably going to die in the next decade or 2 or 3. Simply having that death, mortality as my advisor allowed me to treat each season in a more sacred way. Connie and I do this religiously. At the end of every season, we personify the season. And we'll say something like, thank you, summer, for being such an incredible blessing. If one or both of us don't get a chance to experience you again, and we actually hold in our minds and our imagination that one or both of us dies before the summer comes around next year, we just cherish what a gift you've been. And sometimes I'm moved to tears. It just helps me not take my life for granted, helps me not take my relationships for granted, helps me not take anything for granted. And the fact that I have been studying for 10 years now the rise and fall of civilizations, and I understand how that pattern occurs, I don't even take the things that most of us rely on for survival for granted. Literally, like about a week ago, I remember saying to Connie, we were eating breakfast, and it was like, wow, what a gift. We still get to go to the grocery store. We've still got a working refrigerator and a freezer. Am I confident that that's going to last indefinitely? No. In fact, I'm confident that it's not going to last indefinitely. But by God, I'm going to treat it as sacred and holy and meaningful and like, wow, what a blessing, as long as I have it. Again, that's part of that accepting the worst case scenario possibility, even if the worst case never happens. That was the thing. Once I accepted that I could die in the next 10 months, no other scenario had any power over me. I literally was able to live fearlessly and joyfully on a day-by-day basis. And there wasn't one part of me from that moment, there wasn't one part of me that was resentful. Like, why do I have to have cancer? At the time, I was only 50 years old. There was none of that because I accepted the possibility of worst case. So I would encourage one of the ways that you as individuals and as a congregation can be the calm in the storm is to just remind yourself that you're mortal, that you'll die sometime. Connie and I regularly will say something like, yep, soon we'll be dead. We'll be soon like everlastingly dead along with every other creature. But we're not lost. We die into the body of life in the same way that our atoms and molecules die into our body, and yet we continue. And so even if our species goes extinct in the not too distant future, which is absolutely a possibility, being at peace with that, then no possibility has power over us. And we live with mesmerized, what I call gobsmacked gratitude. Gobsmacked gratitude, like what a blessing. Now, obviously, is it easier for me as a 64-year-old to say that than a 25-year-old? Well, duh. You know, people are at different stages in our lives. And somebody who's in retirement and is, sort of assessing like what they spent their life doing, and then they're wondering if was it really good for the planet. So the death of legacy is not the same thing as a young person dealing with the death of dreams, the death of possibilities. So the first is to nurture an more intimate, personal yummy relationship with life as it really is. Whether you use God talk or not God talk, for that, it doesn't matter. With the universe, with the earth, with Gaia. Okay? The second is to don't ever go more than a few days without reminding yourself that you are mortal and we are mortal. It sounds morbid, but I assure you it will increase the quality of your life substantially. Just to remind ourselves that soon we'll be dead. And all creatures go. Helps us live fully. And it helps us live as a calm space in the midst of a world that seems increasingly crazy. And then finally, to attend to the kinds of things that people almost always, not everybody. Some people are given a terminal diagnosis and they fight until like 3 days before they die, and then they finally accept. We all know people like that, right? Maybe we've had people like that in our families. We also, most of us, know somebody who may at the start be in that place, but fairly quickly comes to the place of just acceptance. And then they live their remaining days, weeks, months, and sometimes years with a place not party down, see, that's the thing. I mean, so sometimes people say, well, you sound sometimes like a doomer, but you've got this like big smile and you seem to live with a lot of joy. You're like weird. And I get it. I mean, my website is postdoom.com. Post-doom, no gloom is my message, right? Unfortunately, to get to post-doom, you got to go through a little bit of doom. So if you haven't accepted, like we are screwed, you're not in post-doom yet. You're still in denial of one sort or another. And that's okay. That's a normal, natural, healthy place. But to be that place of recognizing that our civilization is unsustainable, our civilization is in contraction, our civilization could contract pretty rapidly. And you add to that the kind of stability that allowed for civilizations to even begin in the first place, which is a stable jet stream that allowed us to grow food on a regular basis every year, pretty much the same without, there were variabilities. But now the jet stream's doing this. We've got these heat domes in several places in the world. We got unbelievable flooding, unbelievable drought, unbelievable everything. And it's like, how to make sense of this? I had an experience just 2 weeks ago where I was invited, this major sustainability organization in Pakistan invited me to do a 20-minute presentation to like these leaders of the country of Pakistan. It was televised on Pakistan state TV. And my program was like not holding back. And yet these people, Pakistan is on one of the front lines in terms of dealing. I mean, the floods they dealt with last year and this year also, I mean, it's unbelievable. And yet these people are finding their faith, their trust is supporting them. And many people were able to tell stories of the joy of being of support of others in chaotic times, in collapsing times, in difficult times. Because as all cultures have known, where we find the greatest meaning and joy in our lives is when we can be a blessing to others, when we can be a contribution to others. Especially when we're not freaked out, but they are. And they wonder, why are you not freaked out? Why are you not depressed? Why are you not angry? Why are you not blaming those corporations or that political party or over there? Where's the anger and resentment gone for you? And it usually is because they've nurtured a more intimate relationship with God, however they understand that, where they've accepted possibility, at least, of worst case scenario. But then they spend their remaining days, weeks, months, and years, if we're graced to have that long, in support of others, looking for others. I have a t-shirt. Somebody gave it to me as a gift. It has a picture of the earth, and it has Teotihuacan, the end of the world as we know it. Teotihuacan, right? And I was walking about almost a year ago now in Depot Town in Ypsilanti, Michigan, and there was this young guy, and he looked at my t-shirt. I could tell he was trying to figure out what Teotihuacan was. I said, oh, it's an earth-honoring term. It means things are spiraling down, probably going to get worse, but just find a way to be a blessing to others. You'll be fine. Because that's the stance. The stance of being the calm in the eye of the storm, of being that place of calm in difficult times, comes from accepting reality as it is and being basically in this stance. Okay, here's what's real. Now, what's possible? And then living out of that place of possibility and service, compassionate, generous service to others in that place of chaos. And refusing to get into the trap of finding the people to blame. And that's tough for all those of us who have been activists for many years, because we're all too aware of the evil that has been done by different corporate powers and different political factions and all kinds of stuff. It's very obvious. So to let go of that judgment and blame and find that clarity that comes from understanding, but also the compassion that comes when we let go of the judgment and realize we're all in it together. And this isn't the time to be right. This is a time to be compassionate. And we don't have to be compassionate, but we get to be. And when we get to be compassionate, we are the eye of the storm. We are the calm in the midst of the storm. So, let me just recap. Being the calm of the storm doesn't mean being in denial. It doesn't mean clinging to hope. It doesn't mean insisting that progress is eternal. What it means, quite simply, is accepting what we cannot change, accepting that there are already patterns at work. The forests of the world will continue to burn bigger, more powerful, hotter, probably for the next 100 years. And there's nothing we can do to stop it or slow it. It's already in runaway mode. The oceans are heating up to such a degree that the coral reefs of all the world will be lost, or virtually all the world will be lost, and it's out of our control. And I'm not going to go more. I could go on and on and on, and I'm not going to do it. But there are patterns that are at work that are already beyond human control. So recognizing that that's not your fault because you don't recycle or because you still eat meat or because you still drive. It's nobody's fault. It's just that we're part of an ecocidal civilization that's been human-centered, and we're part of an ecocidal tradition that's been human-centered for like 6,000 or 7,000 years. So we can get off the guilt and we can get off the judgment. This is just what's real. So accepting that and then doing whatever you can to, again, nurture a more intimate relationship with life on life's terms. Connie, my wife, helps other trees. She helps trees migrate. She's a part of this whole thing that Robin Wall Kimmerer, the Native American elder, calls helping forests walk. It's helping trees. In fact, when we leave here today, we're going to go visit one of Connie's friends and colleagues in this field of assisted migration, assisting trees in migrating. It's holy work, whether we go extinct in the near term or not. So, nurturing a more intimate personal relationship with life, befriending your mortality and befriending our mortality, and then simply doing the kinds of things that most people do when they truly accept that the end is possibly in mind. I try to live my life with the end in mind, with loving kindness and gratitude in my heart, and with the truth on my lips. That's my prayer on a day-by-day basis. God, again, I'm not meaning anything supernatural, I'm meaning life. God, help me live today with the end in mind, with loving kindness and gratitude in my heart, and with the truth on my lips. Do I do that perfectly? No. But it gives me a lot of joy, and I have a lot of people contact me who are in freak-out mode or anger mode or depressed mode or whatever, because by the grace of life, I've become the eye in the storm for many of these people.
This was Michael's final sermon. Take a look at the caption of this YouTube video, and you'll find the link to the web page I suggest you go to. I put it together as webmaster, thegreatstory.org, calling it POSTDOOM Pastor. And I realized not long after he died that that's really what he had become in his last worldview shift. He embodied post-doom ways of being and what he called love in action. So again, open the caption, look for the POSTDOOM pastor webpage link. I also linked to an older page on our The Great Story website that has not only all of his materials on the topic of death, but also mine. As a science person on the team, I was the one who contributed most of the science understanding. And I had a lot of programs, and I was especially working on parables, storylines, children's curriculum, rituals, a lot of kinds of things that we can do in my own Unitarian Universalist congregations. So a lot of what Michael is talking about from a science understanding, and that includes as well, I forgot to mention, Michael first got started because of this book, Thomas Berry, The Dream of the Earth. And when Michael encountered this book, he instantly had a worldview shift. And since he was living in the Northeast at that time, Massachusetts, he started visiting Thomas Berry for his mentorship. And Thomas would offer him books from Thomas's library, and he'd borrow them and then come back and learn some more. And as a result of that, Michael published his book a few years later. This one's called Earthspirit. This is a very old copy. You can't find them anymore. Earthspirit, a handbook for nurturing an ecological Christianity. And then he and I met in the fall of 2000 at an event related to Thomas Berry's worldview that was given by Brian Swim in New York City. He and I had been in e-communication because we were both part of working on the Thomas Berry universe story, getting that out into the world in various ways. And so we met at a Brian Swim event. And then in 2007, thanks to Laura Wood at Council Oak Books, who convinced Michael to write a book. Look how thick this thing is. I helped a lot with this book and the editing and the science aspects of it too. But this was published in 2007. If you've seen it, most of you have probably seen what was published a year or two later when this was taken over by a big publisher, New York publisher, Viking Penguin, and put out in another hardcover and also put out in paperback. I should mention this. There are two kind of death litanies that Michael goes through in the Houston, very professionally filmed, excerpt of his talk there in front of a big church. Both of those where there's the audience interaction and then the more the poetic reading one afterwards, I wrote those, original version of it, and then Michael and I worked on them together. I was a professional writer. Last thing I want to make sure I point out, because again, I'm here in our same apartment, and those of you who are familiar with Michael's Zoom conversations, it was back out there in the living room, and you'll still see the lion, the Aslan, that was a kind of a symbol for him from the Chronicles of Narnia that he got a lot of inspiration from. Still there on the wall, still a lot of his stuff on the wall. And I brought in, just to show here, these are his great story beads. Yeah. And you'll see he uses that, the great story beads. I think it's in the second set of excerpts. Yeah, the Houston one. So that's it. I will probably be doing another video, if there seems to be interest, of all of the things that I have learned, supplementing my understanding about death, becoming a widow, and the distinctions of being an elder when this sort of thing happens. If I do produce another video, it'll be several months from now, and it'll be based on conversations that I had, email exchanges, basically the kinds of things I was emailing to close colleagues right after Michael's death, and the changes I was going through, the discoveries I was going through. I might be excerpting some of those and reading them. I learned a lot about death, and in ways that I think can be beneficial to others. So again, everything, take a look at the caption of this YouTube video. I can keep adding things to it, and I'll certainly put a link if I do end up putting in kind of a part 2 on Michael's death. I'll end the way I always do when I'm making a tree video. Here in the last 4 years for Torreya Guardians, either with my pawpaw seed sitting here or with my Florida Torreya, very large seed sitting here, talking about what we citizens do in a voluntary way of helping forest walk in this time when climate is changing much too fast for the trees to do their walking on their own. Here's how I end. May the forest be with you.